When the finale of The Amazing Digital Circus released, one character completely changed in my eyes. Jax. For almost the entire series, Jax seems like the comic relief character. He constantly made jokes, annoyed everyone around him, and never really seemed to take anything seriously. But throughout the show, we can see that there was something he was hiding. Then the finale happened. Now suddenly, all those jokes started to feel like they were hiding something much deeper. I've seen a lot of debate online about Jax's story. Some people think his transgender storyline is incredible representation, and others think it doesn't work. Personally, I think Jax has one of the most well-written character arcs in the entire show. Not because the finale suddenly tells us who he is, but because it reveals who he's been all along. One thing I really appreciate about this reveal is that it doesn't come completely out of nowhere. Looking back, the series has been quietly hinting at it for a while. One of the earliest hints of this was in episode 5, where Jax tells Pomni about his ears and tail and says that they're a pinnacle of his masculinity. But then Pomni points out that Jax doesn't even have a tail. At first it's just a joke, but after the finale it feels like something more. He was trying to convince himself and everyone around him that he was this masculine. Another moment later in the episode comes when Jax is forced to wear the maid outfit. Normally Jax laughs everything off. Embarrassment doesn't seem to exist for him. But here, he completely loses it. He becomes genuinely angry. Even Zubo comments that they've never seen him this upset before. Now this scene can mean a lot of different things, but when you look at everything else the finale tells us, it's easier to understand why something like this would affect him so deeply. Then there's one line that made me start to question this. In episode 6, Jax says that he's not a chicken in an egg waiting to be hatched. At first it sounds like another weird joke, but an egg is actually a common metaphor in the transgender community for someone who hasn't realized or revealed that they're transgender yet. Could that line be a coincidence? Maybe, but once you add it to everything else, it starts looking a lot more intentional. None of these moments prove anything on their own, but it's the pattern that matters. Each clue builds on the last until the finale finally gives us the missing piece. Pomni enters Jax's mind and eventually reaches his memories. This is easily my favorite part of the finale, not because of the reveal itself, but because of what it tells us about why Jax became the person we've known through the series. Jax explains that his parents separated while he was entering high school. Whenever he showed vulnerability, his mother would tell him that he was less of a man than his father, but whenever he stood up for himself, she'd tell him he was just as bad as his father. There was no winning in this situation. No matter what he did, he was wrong. Jax even says it felt like his mother both hated and missed his father at the same time. Eventually, Jax decides to tell her one of the deepest secrets he's ever kept. The episode never explicitly says what the secret is, but considering everything else we've seen, I think it's heavily implied that he's telling her she's transgender. Jax thinks she'll finally understand him, but instead she laughs, then starts making deeply personal comments about him over and over and over again. Then after saying all of those horrible things, she hugs him. That moment honestly hit me harder than the insults. She hurts her, but then immediately acts like she loves her. Jax panics and he pushes her away, and she falls. She doesn't know if she's hurt, she doesn't know if she's pretending, she doesn't wait to find out. She runs. Imagine carrying that with you. The one time you completely open up to someone, you're mocked for it. And then left wondering whether you're responsible for hurting them. It's no wonder Jax spends the rest of her life hiding behind jokes. Then enters Ribbit in Jax's life, and she becomes everything her mother wasn't. She accepts her, she doesn't mock her, she doesn't question her. She just simply accepts her. She places her bow on Jax's head. For one brief moment, Jax actually looks happy. Then someone almost sees her, and she immediately panics and throws the bow off. To me, this isn't about the bow, it's about what the bow symbolizes. It represents the part of Jax that she's terrified of other people seeing. The really tragic part isn't that Ribbit rejects her, she never does. Jax rejects her. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she'd already learned that letting people see the real you only leads to pain. That's what trauma does. Sometimes it convinces you that the people who genuinely care about you are eventually going to hurt you too. So instead of waiting for that day, you push them away first. And that's exactly what Jax does. She becomes cruel, she hides behind jokes, she distances herself from everyone, even Ribbit. She's constantly trying to reconnect with Jax, but she keeps on building walls. Eventually, she gives up, she isolates herself, and before Jax can finally bring herself to apologize, she abstracts. Throughout the series, abstraction represents someone reaching their breaking point. That means Jax has to live with the one horrible truth. The last thing she ever said to the person who accepted her was to push her away. I've seen people argue that Jax's story is bad representation because the show never explicitly says that she's transgender. I understand why some people feel that way. There are definitely situations where saying something directly is important. But personally, I don't think this story needs to stop and announce it. Her comment on her masculinity, the maid outfit, the egg metaphor, the conversation with her mother, the bow, her panic, her isolation, none of these moments mean much by themselves, but together they tell one complete story, and after the finale released, the creator confirmed that Jax is transgender. Honestly though, I don't think that's why the storyline works. The confirmation didn't make me understand the story. The story itself already communicated. The confirmation simply validated what the series has been building toward. And I'll be honest, part of why this storyline affected me so much has nothing to do with Jax being transgender. Now first off, I'm not transgender, I'm cisgender. I was born a man and I still identify as a man. But there was a period in my life where I isolated myself from other people. I kept things to myself instead of opening up, and the more that I did that, the more alone I felt. At the time, it almost felt easier that way. If I didn't tell people what I was struggling with, then I didn't have to worry about being judged or misunderstood. At least that's what I convinced myself. But looking back, all I was really doing was making myself feel even more isolated. The people around me couldn't help because they didn't know what I was going through at the time. Now thankfully, unlike Jax, I eventually learned to let people in. I found people I could genuinely connect with, and I realized something that seems so obvious now, but I didn't understand it back then. Being vulnerable is scary, but staying isolated is usually even worse. I'm not saying that our situations are the same. I can't pretend to understand what it's like to experience Jax's specific struggles. But the feeling of convincing yourself you're better off dealing with everything alone, that's something I understood from Jax. Watching her slowly push away the one person who genuinely cared about her was honestly painful to watch. Not because I made the exact same choices she did, but because I recognized the mindset behind those choices. That's what isolation does. It convinces you that you're protecting yourself and other people. That if you keep everyone at a distance, nobody can hurt you. But what that doesn't tell you is that you're also pushing them away, the people who genuinely want to help. And sometimes by the time you realize that, the distance you've created feels impossible to close. That's why Jax's story hit me so hard, not because I saw myself in every detail of her life, but because I recognized the emotional truth behind it. To me, Jax's story isn't tragic because she's transgender. It's tragic because shame convinced her that vulnerability will only lead to pain. Instead of accepting the people who loved her, she pushed them away. Instead of letting herself heal, she built walls. And by the time she realized she needed to reconnect, it was already too late. That's why I think Jax's story resonates with so many people. Not everyone will relate to being transgender. Not everyone will relate to Jax's childhood. But I think a lot of people know what it's like to hide a part of themselves. To struggle with opening up because they're afraid of being hurt. Jax's story shows where that road can lead if shame is allowed to grow unchecked. Not something as unavoidable, but as a warning. And that's why I think Jax isn't just one of the best characters in the Amazing Digital Circus. I think she has one of the strongest character arcs the series has ever written.